What's up, my Psi enthusiasts? It's Hakeem back with another one with Tyler Stevens and Psi Games Talks. We have a very special guest. We have Kim from Virginia, and she actually will be working with us on a number of projects. She was one of our speakers last year at the first Psi Games. She'll be a speaker this year at the Psi Games, as well as she's helping with some of our training programs. And so she's done so much in her time, in this lifetime. And so I just wanted to pass it over to her and have her share some of her history, and then we'll dive in. Kim, can you tell us something about yourself?
Sure. Well, I guess probably for your watchers, they would be interested in how I got into psionics or my psychic abilities. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I had become, in my late 20s, a very devout Tibetan Buddhist. So I had transitioned into studies and practices within the Tibetan tradition. And, that's a pretty rigorous mental, meditative art and spiritual art that is very different from our Western spiritual traditions. And the focus is on different concepts than what the West is concerned about. For example, the mind is not a noun in the way that we think about the mind. It's more of a stream. So once you start to understand that Eastern or Tibetan mindset, you start to see automatically this expanded state of awareness that you enter into. Because obviously I'm a person who was born in the West. I raised my kids in a Western society, but my heart and my remembrances of past lives comes directly out of Tibet. So the experiences that I had in just stepping into this very foreign way of thinking was additive, right? So it was additive to my Western trained mind, which I've been trained as an engineer. I have a master's degree in environmental engineering and environmental engineering science, post-grad work at MIT and Harvard Law. So I have a very Western scientific mind that was put to use for a lot of professional purposes. And so the Tibetan mind was added to that through various disciplines, and you go through a lot of disciplined practice. And Hakeem, I know you're a black belt in so many different traditions, but it's a similar kind of philosophy in terms of how we relate to the mind itself. And so in Tibet, you're not born with five senses. You have six senses. So there's a mind sense that's automatically placed within your awareness upon birth within that culture, within that tradition. So things like psychic sports is not foreign in any way. There's you walk around Tibet, you go to do a pilgrimage around Mount Kailash, and you see all the psychic masters' handprints and footprints laid into the rock itself, right? So this is just a common experience within the Tibetan culture, is that these psychic sports and what we can do with our mind is completely normalized and a part of who we are. So I guess it was around when I was in my late 20s, I began my journey into studying and practicing with the Tibetans. My main teachers were Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And then within the Tibetan system, eventually you enter this path of the Vajrayana, where you specifically train in energy practices. So you move from the idea that we are limited to a physical body. As Bob Monroe points out, we're more than a physical body, and the Tibetans have that. The Tibetan Buddhists have this as part of the next one of the stages of development within their practice discipline. So I took my Vajrayana vows, or my energy diamond vehicle vows, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Little Tibet, which is Ladakh within India, right, in northern India, at the foothills of the Karakoram and Himalayan mountains. And it was there. I'll just take you back with me because it still blows my mind. I mean, I was working as an engineer, doing very normal engineering kinds of things, and very materialist. My viewpoint was very Western, in that cause and effect was in the physical. And so the last night of the empowerment, so an empowerment is where the teacher gives you the power to really enter into this new process of seeing. The last night of the empowerment, you lay down, with kusha grass under your pillow, and so it was a full moon, which matters in energy work, because celestial alignments of all kinds really amp up the energy and what's possible to be experienced. Not that I knew that at the time, but that my little materialist head was laid down on the pillow. And during my dream yoga, which is like lucid dreaming, but very much the practices are towards the idea of an enlightened state, rather than doing, anything in the lucid state. While I was in there, when I woke up in that lucid state within the dream, I was in more dimensions than we occupy here. So many more. It's impossible to really explain, without a common reference point, what that was like, except, it's sort of like going from black and white to color. And there were these two massive wisdom beings standing over me, and they had the ability to show me to me. So what they showed me was basically I was a puppy to them. I was cute and had a lot of potential, and they just loved me so much. And so I woke up from that dream really understanding that reality was much different than I had experienced to that date. And from that moment, when I had come back, I was open. My central channel had opened, my crown chakra had opened, and there was a period of about 24 hours of energy pouring down into my central channel. This is like within the Vajrayana tradition, you learn about all of the chakras, nadis, and the winds, the lung. And so there was a lot that was happening in a very short amount of time, about 3 months in conventional time. And the interesting thing was, with respect to the psychic abilities, I had none before that trip and before that empowerment. And when I came back, I had all of them. So I had clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance, all of them. And so there was an adjustment period of trying to integrate this new level of awareness and how to use it in my life. And it wasn't so much longer after that I had gone to the Monroe Institute and found basically a tribe of individuals that were doing things like spoon bending and doing practices that were I guess, had a more Western tilt to it. Tibet has their own practices, and like the Lungam runners, who can run super long distances and never tire, and they're in a trance state, or Tumo practitioners or telepathic practitioners. So Tibet has its own psychic sports, they call them. But at Monroe, people were doing, their own psychic sports too. Spoon bending was one that I had seen for the first time and thought, oh, I'm going to do that one day. I'll bend all these forks and spoons, and didn't really have much of a understanding of the history of it. Just saw a bunch of bent cutlery up on the wall and thought, hey, that looked cool. So I'd like to do that. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. That was 2014. And since that time, I've been just on the path of, deeper exploration, and have gone into a lot of different territories, more like an explorer, not just in the subtle, but also in the physical. Still have that groundedness to the earth where, for example, I was a ice climber and a mountaineer at the time that I got all my psychic senses. So I would use that skill because I was a newbie. I was a beginner ice climber, and would understand by, sensing the ice and the rock and knowing where to place my foot. So I avoided crevasses, and knowing which direction to go if we got lost, things like that. So was more an applied, using sort of physical experiences and merging them with psychic or subtle energy awareness to really increase a love of life.
Wow. That's a lot. You said more than a mouthful. And I've been taking notes here of things that I thought, would be great. And one I want to go back to is like this, you kind of, it's such a part of your life that, it kind of was like just part of the story, but really like this was really huge. You said the Dalai Lama, was someone who helped initiate you, or initiated you in this ritual or this practice. Tell me more about that. So you were this engineer, and then all of a sudden you're in Tibet or you're in India, and you're getting, you're getting initiated. What is that? That's number one. What happened there? And then two, this idea of initiation of empowerment. Can you explain that as well? So those two things would be really important, I think, for the audience to hear.
So I went over for a specific practice called the Kala Chakra. So Kala Chakra translates to wheel of time or chakra of time. And so this is when we think about chakras, we think about those energy centers along our central channel that are located specifically, we think about them for psychic ability at the brow chakra, the third eye. But the Kala Chakra is really looking at the chakra of time. So the entirety of the dimension of time, right? As the subject of our awareness. So we see time differently after doing those practices. And I had been empowered to begin those practices, which involve moving your subtle energy. And that's basically what the Dalai Lama does over a 10-day period. He's opening, as the carrier of the lineage of those practices, he is entraining his energy with your energy as the student, and he's opening your channels up. So he is the grounded force for the what the Tibetans would characterize as a deity, but really the deity is you. There's nothing outside of you per se, but there is a version of you this being state, a state of being that has the awareness of this entirety of this chakra of time. So all the practices are meant to, it's a graduated path of understanding the complexity and the simplicity both of time itself. And then as you work in your meditation, in your energy practices, you move that energy through time, which you can think about as change itself, not so much time as registered to the sun or the moon, although of course that's part of it, but really time as the correlate to change. So not being in a singularity, but being somewhere outside the singularity as we move and change through life itself. And that these higher states are available to us, and we are brought up to them, and we're shown the way. So the Dalai Lama was the teacher for that practice for me. There's other practices that other lineage holders have taught me, but that was my main entry point into seeing beyond, actually seeing how portals work. Right? So how these 11th dimensional wisdom beings made their way to this little puppy that was in Ladakh, just waiting to meet them, how that portal of connection was created through time to allow for the exchange of energy and information to occur. So that's a little bit about that empowerment. There's, His Holiness had given this empowerment to millions of people for a long period of time over his life. And this really was his mission for a long time. The 14th Dalai Lama was to reactivate individuals who wanted to deepen their practice into this level of awareness. And so for quite a number of years, I led his, on behalf of Dr. Robert Thurman in Tibet House, which is His Holiness's seat within the United States and North America. I led the Kala Chakra study and practice group. So all of the practitioners, we'd get together and do the practices to explore these awarenesses of time and portals and this enlightened state of being. So that's answer number one. The second is the empowerment, which is really an interesting idea for me, and where I have come along my path here in the West. It is just a normal course of being that within the Tibetan culture and within a lot of Eastern Buddhist cultures, there is something called an abhisheka, that's Sanskrit. Awang is Tibetan for empowerment, Reiju within Japanese. So these empowerments are really the lineage connecting you to a certain level of awareness. And the reason it can happen is because the person exists, the being exists in the human form, right? That's not to say we can't connect to non-physical beings, not to say that at all, but there is an increase of power when we think about even wave functions and how they arise and how they function. We have a wave function, and that function has an amplitude aspect of it when it's in a dualistic form, when it's not in a non-dual form. When it's in a dualistic form, we do have a power aspect to it, and that is the amplitude of the power. So the empowerments, the abhishekas, they take the power of that practice, which has been hosted and maintained on Earth by these humans, whoever has taken on the responsibility of sharing it and passing it along. Those people are like, I would say, transformers, and when you think about the way we exchange electrical power within our grid system here on Earth, we're taking and stepping down power, right? We step down power from the generation of it down, down, down into a localized individual house that can receive that level of power, right? So someone like the Dalai Lama, he's like one of these transformers from a higher source that can hold a lot of power. And so he is allowing through this process to activate you so that you can receive that same stream of power, right? According to the traditions that, and the prerequisites that you have to go through to be allowed to sit and receive that power. So there is things like the preliminary practices that really are supposed to clear your energy field and make you aware of your energy field such that if it becomes, just again, using the correlate or the analogy of our power grid system, when our equipment gets old, when the lines start fraying, we start to diminish our power. And so it keeps those systems intact, right? Because we can feel them. We know whether they're alive or not. It's live wires or dead wires, So if we're not doing the things that keep that energy in the state that really allows for it to flourish, then that power diminishes. And so the tradition that empowers you does expect, it keeps a relationship open, right? Anybody that I've empowered, they're my student. I'm connected with them telepathically. If they're in trouble, I know it. If they need help, I know it, right? If I have to deliver difficult information or direction to them, that's my responsibility. So it's like once you establish that connection is maintained, right, through honoring the tradition from which it came. So that's the empowerment energy. And one thing I did notice, because when I became a Reiki master within the West, I noticed that the Reiki power was, which is just universal life force energy. It's the same energy that we call lung in Tibetan, or chi, or ki in Japanese, right? Reiki. So it's the same thing, right? It's the same energy. But what I noticed was in the Reiki practices that I had come out of in the West, that they really were missing the power aspect. And the reason for this was that the practices omitted the empowerment, because it was when Reiki first came to America, it came through this woman named Takata, and she sort of made it fit within her community, which was a Christian community, and they didn't have anything like this within that community. So she sort of modified the way that this energy is transferred. And this is just my hypothetical. This is just my belief based upon how the energy works, and what I've seen is that really caused a diminution of the energy. Because as soon as I brought the Reiju energy, the Wang energy back into my Reiki practices and the Reiki transmissions I was doing, it really amped up the power and what the practitioners would experience with that energy. So again, with greater power comes greater responsibility. You have to be more discerning about, how many students you can take on and what kinds of things you're doing, and really customize the approach based upon what you feel is the most balanced approach. So that's like in a nutshell what I've been doing with the Reiju or the Wang energy, and how it's kind of brought back to the West through these practices that I'm reviving, I think, within Western Reiki. They still exist within Japanese Reiki. Make no mistake, the Japanese are still they still perform the empowerments over in Japan. It just sort of got wiped out of the practices here. They replaced it with something that was more like a much smaller, less powerful practice called the attunement. And the attunement was sort of like allowing for you to connect with the non-physical Reiki through as like a channeled connection, as opposed to a grounded on earth connection, right? So the groundedness is really important, Hakeem, as you know, with working with this energy. If it's not grounded, it can become very chaotic, very dangerous very quickly as you increase in power. So so it's really important that as we increase in power, that we're doubling down on our groundedness practices and making sure that that energy, that we're spending a lot of time in nature, that we're spending a lot of time with our families, with things and activities that create a groundedness to the earth itself and our humanity.
That's powerful. And it if we were to use an analogy from, basic electrical systems, you have like the more power you have, the thicker the wire has to be for your ground, and it has to go down deep into the ground. So it's there even in our own, if we're working with actual, electrical power for our homes, it's a very similar concept. So it's awesome to see that it's this way. Before I don't want to take over too much, but Tyler, you have anything? Because I got a whole list over here.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to get like that was pretty high level for me. That was pretty incredible to listen to. But just, because I think people are going to be coming here too from a very foundational level, like just starting to explore consciousness or spiritual exploration. So what are some things that they can just right off the bat maybe practice, or, even go into some of the maybe similarities in which you found in Tibetan practices and then came over to the Monroe Institute, that somebody can kind of get an idea of grasping from a foundational level?
Yeah. I think, first of all, the thing that gets you excited is the thing to pay attention to, right? And to trust your innate wisdom. So for me, when I got to Monroe the first time, and I looked up in the snack area, and there's this whole case of these bent forks and spoons, and I don't even know what they were, to be honest. I had no idea. And for some reason, I got really excited about seeing them. And if you think about time as not being linear, but really being more of a circle or a spiral, that we have these alignments that are coming to us, right? And so it's less about finding the right thing, and it's more about finding who we are. So I say, if you are excited, Tyler, you mentioned to me OBEs, like you're excited about out-of-body experiences. So my advice is to do a lot of that, really establish a practice, because this is what the Tibetans do, right? When we learn Tumo, for example, we can't do it day one. We have to learn about the practice as we try it. So out-of-body is a great place to start. And, these are out-of-body is like a big thing in Tibet too, because that's how we see our students, this is how we connect with others in a non-physical way, right? So the Tibetans have a whole, construct that focuses attention on being within many different states of consciousness, either simultaneously or linearly. So they have a Bardo states. So this is like you and me, Hakeem, are all working within the physical Bardo right now. But very easily, say tonight, you could lay down and meditate. You could be in a supine position and be intending to work on your OBE practice, right? And you could be listening for guidance wherever that guidance is coming from. And letting go is an important aspect of that practice, but just really repeating it over and over, knowing that you're moving from a from a physical state of awareness into a non-physical state. And this is really, the name Bardo means in between, right? So, if you know about lucid dreaming practice in the West, there's this idea of wake-induced lucid dreaming. And if you stay awake and lucid during the time that you transition from the physical Bardo to the Bardo of meditation, or then even to the Bardo of dream, you'll actually see and get information about how your mind constructs your reality between those states, right? And then once you have a solid foundation for yourself, this is how Tyler is, this is my biases and the things that make me special. These are the things that make me interested in doing this, probably a past life for you, or a future life. It does, you'll discover that along your journey. And then you can even group travel with other people in the process, right? So at some point when you've stabilized in your own practice, you connect with your friends and you're like, hey, let's go out, and group travel astrally tonight on a full moon or something. And then that's a fun practice to do, but it often has to do with the two ideas that it's exciting to you, because that excitement is the power, right? That's going to keep you committed, because you're like, that excitement, it's for me, it's my dream here. This is my dream. And knowing that you've already done this, you've already done this many times. So allowing for that knowing to come through, that you've already been doing this. You've probably already been doing this at night and don't know it, or you're a masterful OBE person and you might just keep that to yourself. All things are possible, right? Because this is our experience of what's for us in this life. So where are we going to take it? Where do we want to push the boundaries a little bit, and to let go of fear? A lot of, I have a funny story about, like, it's not quite OBE, it's more levitation, but because it was in the physical. But I was out in living in New Mexico, and I have this tachyon chamber that's an eye pyramid from Sedona, and it was in my dining room, and I had an electrician come by, and he had his son with him because he couldn't speak. He wasn't an English speaker. And so his son spoke both Spanish and English. And his son approached me and said, my dad wants to ask you some questions because he seems like you might have the answer. And I said, well, what's going on? He said, and so he translated for his dad. And basically the man had been levitating in his bed, but was afraid because of his Christian beliefs. And he just thought it was evil or something. And I said, no, it's amazing. You should be levitating. Why wouldn't you be? So, and of course I read his energy in his field and made sure it wasn't the negative, wasn't that the thing I needed to tell him was that he needed to clean his energy out or clean his energy body. No, he was great. And so, he was just spontaneously levitating. So, so he just had no awareness of any of this and had just spontaneously started happening. And that energy comes from lots of different places, but for sure, excitement is one of those things that's a sure match for what you can be doing, what you should be trying to do. Yeah. So I'm not sure if I covered, to get started on that, I would just say it's actually a lot like what Hakeem and I will be teaching in the It's using the same protocol, frankly, as the Psychokinesis Intensive, right? The first thing is the visualization and the intention, visualizing yourself out of body, right? Now, the thing with that is, and why manifestation tends to be a little ho-hum and not as powerful as it can be, is that we need to stabilize our visualization. We need it stable, right? Because the universe, we're in constant flux with it. And so if we have a stable idea that we're holding with power from our heart, it's going to manifest. It will. But the thing is, we have to have that visualization, that level of communication back with the field long enough to be able to tell all that is that this is really what we're interested in. So in Tibetan Buddhist practices, when you start the Vajrayana path, when you start down this path, you're doing a lot of visualization. It's a sadhana practice is what it's called. And you visualize, you have these tankas, which you can see one right behind me. So you have these practice supports of like how to picture what it is that you want to experience. And you're basically memorizing. As a beginner, you're memorizing those things and then you're rebuilding them in your mind, right? So my main practice, the Kala Chakra, I would go through, there's like a being Kala Chakra with his partner Vishvamata, and they've got he's got 24 arms and he's got all different things in his arms, like a rope, like a sword, noose, all the things. So you just memorize what is in his hands and what she's holding as well. And through that memorization and that remembering, right? The remembering, you're actually just remembering who you are. So you get to visualize and stabilize this very, this very beautiful idea of who you are, a person who's doing OBE, somebody who's going out there and exploring in the non-physical realm, because there's so many incredible experiences through those portals. Of course you would want to do it. Of course you would want to do it, right? And it doesn't require, flights or crampons or any of the gear you need in the physical, right? You just can go out wherever you want at any time, and places you never even thought of before and could never even imagine. And being out there and looking at the scale of looking at a waterfall of stars. I mean, imagine the scale of that. And it's just something, all these places that you can go and experience in the non-physical. I mean, it's really such a blessing to be able to hold an embodiment here on earth and have those experiences as well. And it's not difficult, I can tell you that. If anybody has ever said that, it's not true. But you do need to routinely practice and you need to develop your stabilized mind, right? And it's pretty easy once you get one idea of just you seeing yourself out of body, and holding that visualization stable, right? And then charging it up with excitement. And anybody who's doing anything for the first time, you are going to find that excitement for it. So you can open your heart chakra and join your heart to that stabilized visualization. And then this is the one piece that's very difficult for Westerners, is to let go, and you have to let that energy go. And because it has to come back to you, if we keep holding it through a desire, through an idea of a tether, because we keep going back to it, and we keep, like a kid going back and forth to its parent, trying to get, the Christmas present out. It doesn't work, right? We have to wait for the time, the divine timing that it wants to drop in. And those are always the most difficult to get past the first, I don't know, 100 times, but it's letting go and really just giving it up, and haven't really found a really exceptional way of explaining this in like a Western idea. I don't know, Hakeem, do you have something? Because I come from the Tibetan tradition, we have lots of divine, lots of deities we can think about and just give up, the energy into the vastness, the shunyata, the emptiness. It's part of that practice, just of the being within the culture. But I don't know, have you found a good Western correlate for that? Because I have not. I don't know how to convince people to just let things go and trust very well.
It's very difficult, I found, here in the West, because our materialistic framework that we have here, which is very rooted in the idea that I have to be, nothing will happen without me actually physically doing something. Like I have to touch the light to turn on the light. I have to turn off the light. If I want to go and become a lawyer, I have to go to school and I have to follow the lessons, and then I have to graduate, and everything is really laid out in that way where it's very physically oriented, where I have to consistently be doing something in order to get something in return. And so this idea that not doing is actually doing it's challenging for some people. And I've talked to people, and I'm sure people listening to this will identify with the idea, or watching this, that will identify with the idea that when you don't have anything to do, sometimes that becomes very uncomfortable, because it's like, if I'm not doing something, what am I doing? Which is an oxymoron, right? If I'm not doing something, what am I doing? What's happening here? And so sometimes that could be that can become very challenging, I found, for sometimes even myself, but I see it in other people. The saving grace for me, I think, is my meditation, and me recognizing through my meditation that just allowing myself to be is within itself a greater state of things that connects me to something else. And so what we'll even be going over in the PK training event that we have in March is this staring and this focus on this triangle. And and people may have heard the idea of like the yantra, like the symbol that represents something, which is and I'm not sure if it's the same in Tibetan practices, but like kind of, it sounded like that's what you were talking about, where you have this representation that depicts something that's greater, but it allows you to connect. You'll have your mantra, you'll have your yantra, and the yantra, you can look at it, and then you can kind of see and bring and gaze upon it and bring those lessons in. But this idea of having like this upward triangle, which is like me kind of releasing and looking on the outside, and then this downward triangle, which is representative of me looking on the inside. And then this idea that both of them are working in unison. There's this inner and outer awareness that becomes a greater expanded overall awareness that allows me to kind of be free of the hangups of just my physical reality. And so I'm off on a tangent now, but I think that's how I would explain it.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. And I love that part of the training that you've developed for that, because it's showing, I love the idea of that triangle visualization, because it's, it's so wide at the top and so pointed, single pointed at the bottom. And there's that juxtaposition, the duality of those two states, right? Of the spaciousness and this single pointedness. And it is that dance between those two states that we're constantly engaged in for ourselves, and our own mind is constantly in this dance between, is this a doing state or a being state? even when you're getting out of body for the first time, you know, and you're super vibey and your vibrations are going, you know, and then you're just like so excited, you know it's coming, you know it's going to happen, you know, and then but you can't be too excited because then it's going to like collapse it, you know. So it's this constant dance, but really that letting go of the goal, you know, the pathless path, letting go of the goal of the bending the spoon, you know, of just like setting the intention, powering it up, letting it go, and then waiting for the right time to become a part of it again, of the creation. You know, that's the cycle. You know, that's the manifestation cycle, and that's going to keep going until it doesn't. You know, until there's some other, I don't know, reality in which we're present, and manifestation gets more complicated or gets more simple, and it becomes less of a focus of what we're doing here. But right now, in this dualistic form and formlessness, doing and being, we're in play all the time with the state of being in a being state versus being in a doing state. So when do we, you know, transition from one to the other, and what's the resistant energy that's keeping us from moving, and what's the excited energy that's too much, you know, for what we want to create, you know. So it's always finding that balance between those two things.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of this type of training, is it allows us to do that. And I think you said, or not think, but you said a quote, or I'm quoting you, which is, you know, there is both a spoon and then there's also no spoon, all at the same time, if I'm saying it correctly. And and that just gave me my little Matrix moment when I was talking to you one day, where I felt like Neo in the Matrix, and I was I was learning from the kid with the spoon that was like, you know, also could have been the one, you know, everybody was searching for the one. And I was like, yeah, there's a spoon and there is no spoon. How come I didn't think of that? You know, like it was a super beautiful moment for me. But I think that's part of this journey. That's part of the learning. And one of the things I would love to talk about, if Tyler doesn't have anything he wants to jump in with, is this idea here in the West too, because we kind of hit on it earlier, that there are still people getting there and having experiences and doing beautiful things. But even when you had touched upon some of the Reiki stuff, there was some history there where, you know, someone came and tried to make it more presentable to people in their circle, and may have inadvertently, or could have been thinking, okay, I'm going to start here, and then this person at least gets an introduction, and then at some point they'll go on to kind of explore more, and then they will find those empowerments down the line. So I don't want to speak for the person who created that, because maybe that was when, you know, this lady who brought it and changed it in this way, maybe she had some grander vision. But I also wanted to say that even in my own practice as a yogi, you know, talking to people and saying, you know, yoga, yeah, I do my yoga every morning. And then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, do you do, like, what poses do you do? And I'm like, oh, you know, this morning I actually didn't do any poses at all. The only pose I did was the original asana, you know, which is the seated position as I meditated, which, you know, and did my breath work and all this stuff. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute, you didn't do any, like, you know, down dog or up dog or any of these things. And I'm like, no, I didn't do any of that. And it's kind of the same concept, like here in the West. It seems like it's getting more well known, but, you know, yoga has become like this exercise. And even when you talk about some of the practices, like now Tumo is really popular because of, you know, a specific person out there who has has a group of people that he's teaching Tumo to as a means to like regulate their system and stay warm when they're like immersed in ice water and stuff like that. But even Tumo is, like, from what I understand, a smaller aspect of a grander practice. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Tumo is one of the 6 yogas in Europa, which are the classic 6 practices that a yogi, like a mind yogi, would take on. And yeah, so it's activating the subtle energy system, right? So there's an architecture to the system. There is a process. Generally speaking, I have talked to bhakti practitioners, people who are devotees of God. And it does seem like their system is reverse from the Tibetan system, so the Tibetan system, you're going up from the root up to the crown, and bhakti Hindus will go, their energy, when I biofield image them, their energy is going from crown to root. So, I think there's a lot of diversity within the architecture that we have for the subtle energy, and so that's why these are individual practices, right? Because like the guy doing Tumo, I guess I don't know him or haven't heard of him, but I guess if he's jumping in ice, having people jump in ice water, they're using hot Tumo, but there's cold Tumo as well, right? So it's like, how do we take the subtle energy, which just sits like in a non-physical expression, and how do we work with it, to do whatever, right? And that is I think this is the question for us now, is if we start to open up and say, okay, now we have access to these abilities, what are we going to do with them, right? So there's some practices, I feel like spoon bend in the West, I've always found it to be particularly useful because there is a known resistant energy to the spoon or the fork that is inherent. We use a spoon or a fork every day. People are super familiar with that. Like, what is the level of resistance on that material object? And how do I move my chi or move my lung to the place where that spoon bends, where we are changing the nature of the spoon or the fork based upon our thoughts and our feeling states. Whereas that intersection, of course, thoughts and feelings really do fall into a category of the non-physical. Like, I don't know how the West has actually worked so long without an idea of like the mind sense. Honestly, like, I don't know how that happened. Like, what categories do we put thoughts and feelings in as if they're not energy itself, right? And so, and like that cause and effect doesn't apply there as well, like it's sort of like language really defines how we evolve within a culture. And I think by not having an established language around this very basic reality that there is something called thoughts and feelings and perceptions, and they have energy, where does that energy reside, right? When you slow down and start asking just basic questions, foundational questions about the energy of thoughts and feelings and perceptions, mental formations and consciousness itself, all of the 5 heaps that the Buddha originally pointed to when he was giving his discourse on this. When you think about energy, it's like, of course, they're at some level of energy that we can actually see now. Of course we can. I mean, you use it in your devices, I'm sure, for measurements for the Psi Games and biofeedback and biophoton imaging. There's just, we can detect that energy level very easily now. But there's a lag time, right, with the culture in which, like, well, okay, I don't know anything about this. I'm not used to thinking this way. I'm not used to thinking about my thoughts, right? I'm not used to thinking that they have power to them, right? We've forgotten the power in our own thoughts and our own sounds. and directing with intention, like a mantra, how powerful that is. And now that everyone's sort of waking up to this, oh my gosh, okay, so now this is the power level that we're working at. We already understand the physical, and then our next graduating step is into the subtle. So where's the intersection, that in-between state between the physical and the subtle? And then we get to explore that transition between the two states. And then the more you keep going into them, the further and further out you can get on both, I feel. I feel like you can gain awareness in both directions, on both the physical and the non-physical. And then somewhere that creative energy starts to come in and really gives us ideas and inspiration and motivation to create something new.
That's deep. Tyler, what you got?
Well, you know, every podcast episode, I sort of have to ask a little bit of an alien UFO question. And you mentioned these beings that I thought it was a very interesting story, that you interacted the two beings that I think maybe may have referred to as like a dog or something, which is crazy. But how do you see those, like, how do you see those beings are, you know, as non-human intelligence, as like alien beings, as beings from other planets that have the ability to do that, as kind of smorgasbord of all of that? Or how do you see beings that are being interacted with in these states?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do encounter them a lot, I'll just say, because I'm also interested in exploring those territories. So those wisdom beings, what I felt like they were at a level of what we could call like 11th dimensional beings. And they, which I don't think that they naturally reside with form in that state, but that collective consciousness of a primordial wisdom, sort of that, using the transformer metaphor, sort of found and streamed into a place where they could take form, and I could meet them at this bridge that was created between themselves and myself. Now, ultimately, Tyler, what I did come to understand was that was my lineage. You know, like they came to me because I was in their, you know, they were responsible for me in a way of like tapping me and just waking me up. And I've only really reconnected with them once. It feels like they're sort of out of scope for what I'm here to do. That was like their job, was just to give me a, like, you go pup, you know, you go girl pup, and get me like my mind blown, you know. But 2 years ago, I had an experience at my house. I was at my father's house for Christmas, and the dog woke me up around 2 a.m. And I walked outside, and there's like at least 20 orbs over my father's house. And it was funny because, like, you know, you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, why are the stars so close to the ground? Like, it doesn't make any sense. You're trying to find a reference point for this particular news situation. And so I went inside, got at my phone, took some video of them. And but ultimately, it was cold outside, and I wasn't able to establish a telepathic communication with them. I had to go back inside and ask them, you know, who are you? Why are you here? And so through that connection of meditation, telepathy, they sent me a picture of what they looked like in form. And it was very much like a hammerhead shark, like bipedal, which I've never heard anybody else talk about, or I was not familiar with what they looked like before they showed themselves to me. And, you know, basically they said, I said, oh, are you landing? And they said, no, we have a mothership, and we're kind of down here just to sort of get people familiar with us. And this is a phased approach. You know, we just don't want to just drop in. We don't want to create fear. We want energy of connection and who we are to be the dominant energy in the meeting, so I have lots of those encounters, and usually with clients, not so much for myself, because I've had so many personal experiences. Unless that being is important to my personal development, usually I'm seeing beings as a result of working with someone. So I have a lot of orbs come in. Those tend to be loved ones who've passed, and they would be more in a different state of consciousness, not in the physical bardo that you and I exist in currently, but a different level of consciousness where they're occupying that, and it's not all the same place. But usually it's someone's connected through the heart initially. But I've met the Kachina, which are interdimensional beings, and met them in the physical. That was in a portal out in New Mexico and Santa Fe, which they're known to have a portal there. But they left markings on my face, which was proof of the physical contact. And I talked to friends of mine in the Pueblo about it, and they said, "Oh yeah, this is how we interact with them as well." And we actually trade pottery with them, but they don't exist. They have portals that they come through, but they're physical, and they pass through into our physical reality temporarily, which I think I understand. Like a lot of people, I've never encountered a Sasquatch, but I understand that that's how a lot of people understand that they connect. I have met a lot of people who've met Yeti, though, or have encountered Yeti. I mean, everybody in Tibet talks about the Yeti, so that's not unusual there to spot a Yeti. But those are like interdimensional. I would call those interdimensionals, because they really have this ability to be in the physical, at least some of the time, the same physical environment that you and I occupy, but they have the ability to also like go into another state where we can't access. And the Tibetans call those Beuls as well. Those are sort of Shangri-La as a Beul, the idea that there's these beautiful places that we can travel to and visit in the physical. But in terms of UFOs and, non-physical beings and the wisdom beings in particular, my understanding was that they don't really have form normally. It was sort of like the collective consciousness that they occupy, just use the tool of form to project something for my benefit, for my growth. So, it's such a wild place, right? Like our reality itself is just like constantly making me like speechless, really. When you think about what's
well, it makes
possible.
sense too of how you mentioned just you elevating to their level and then them sort of like going in manifestation so that you can both meet on the same plane. So it's like they're acknowledging that like you just can't reach that level on your own, and they might have to come down so that you can have an understanding. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have all because the encounters have only been a few times where I've really just limited to a few times where I've physically met the being that is clearly not a human, but something else, and doesn't, it's hard because you don't even know the questions to ask, right? And you don't have a stable enough situation to make the exchange of information. Like it's very just fleeting, like just the facts, ma'am. The time I met the Kachina, they did have me go into water to meet them. And I think that probably had something to do with the length of time that I was able to stay with them, because the water must be a stabilizing, or I don't know. I don't really know, but it had something to do with the ability to have an extended meeting with them in the physical, and what my physical reality was. They definitely came to me. I didn't go into their physical reality. And so, yeah, I mean, gosh, and then these hammerhead shark beings, like, can you imagine like them landing and I don't know. They're probably not on the first wave, right, of contact.
Chaos. Yeah.
Well, I want to just take I want to just take a few minutes to say thank you, but then also really just get your take on what it is that you want to impart during our PK event, and just so that people know, just so that there's no weird ideas, because I've noticed that, sometimes we could mean something and then other people are taking it another way. But I want to make sure it's very clear that our PK event is open to everyone, every background, wherever you are. One caveat, as long as you're not, trying to hurt anybody or put anybody down or anything like that, that then in that case, stay home and eat your potato chips. But if you are, a kind person who wants to learn how to do this and really want to be around like-minded individuals who have good hearts that are really trying to explore and learn how to do this in a way that's going to really work for you, and also allow you to retain and maintain your energy, which is really huge in PK. I've met quite a few people who have gotten involved in this because they saw something or they read something and they start practicing, and then they crash like immediately, like really hard. And as you know, Kimla, and I know that's because there's certain protocols and things that you should follow to make sure that you are protecting your energy and you're not just always outputting, but there's a generation of a renewed generation and development of energy coming back to you, and being able to charge those batteries. And so, can you give us a little understanding of what the PK class is going to be from your perspective as an instructor that's going to be there?
Yeah. Well, I think most importantly is this grounding piece of these, really what's perceived and talked about as magical. It's really not. It's really just you being this newer version of yourself, right? It's this entering into a state of being that uses energy in a more expanded way. And certainly when we come together in community, do this work, we've got each other's backs. We have already been down the path. We've already done this. We've already bent millions or hundreds of thousands of spoons at this point, and taught other people how to do it. And so you have the ability to ask questions. You have the ability to look at your whatever your resistant energy is, and work on, why is this block here? And how do I release it? Right. And classically, we as individuals are not very good at doing that. We're not very good at looking at our own stuff and our own history and being able to move it clearly. I mean, there's, within Buddhism, we always say, like, a diamond can't cut itself, or a razor can't cut itself. And that's because we really need community. We need the ability to talk to one another and to be able to ask good questions and be able to give good instruction about how to work at these very subtle levels, because this is not the physical. This is not the physical. This is the subtle level. This is the area, the energy that's above the physical. So it just means, as you become more sensitive, and this is a part of the process, as you become more sensitive, you also have to set more boundaries, right? You have to create for yourself some boundaries that are protective of your energy. because we inherently know how to do that with our physical being, right? We have, we close our door at night. I'm trying to think what other boundaries I have. We lock our doors, right? Or we keep our things in an orderly place so we can access them again, and that we're not leaving our energy everywhere. We have it orderly. So this is a way of learning and becoming familiar with those key practices that really drive our enjoyment of these practices, as well as the level of awareness we can gain through them. So there are certain, when you enter the stage of mastery of this level of energy, you have your experience, and you can read what the person needs directly. And so you can be very precise about what it is they need to know to be able to work with the energy. So it's just that you can be more specific, you can be more real, and you can hold the container in a powerful but a protective way. You can have that level of power because protection is there, right? That beautiful location you've picked for us. I mean, we're protected, we're protected, our energy's protected there because that space is protected. And so there are things that, what's the difference between someone who's a beginner and someone who's an expert? All the expert knows is what's the signal through the noise. You know what's noise and you know what's signal, right? That's all you're doing is being able to differentiate between those two lines of communication. That line of information is what's unimportant and what's most important, right? Not just for these people, but for the practices going forward, for this type of work going forward. And that's what you impart in a one-to-one or a group level experience. So plus you get to hang out with you, and that's really exciting.
Well, I'm just excited to hang out with you and maybe Tyler. From my perspective, I think one of the things that really I value a lot and what I wanted to bring in a class like this is this idea and what you said earlier. One, you were talking about ice climbing and how you were using this intuitive practice as a means to help you make choices that so you wouldn't get hurt. Where are the crevasses at, and where are these? Where's the best footing, and it was functional for your life. And so one of the things for me is how do we make these things functional, for our lives, and what does that look like? Because a person might say, well, yeah, I can make this wheel turn, but what does that mean for me and my life, and how do I relate that to my everyday life? And so that balance and that understanding. And then the other is this idea of, you and I had this conversation of this mage idea, this idea of this individual, male, female, who has training and practices that they can do to help them build these things, just like going to the gym, or just like learning how to run. When I took track and field in high school, I was surprised to know that there was more to running than just running. It was like, I had my coach telling me my hands need to be a certain way, and my knees need to move this high, and my feet need to be this way. And I found that by following that protocol, I actually was more efficient. I was faster. I felt stronger and better. I felt more in flow with the natural environment. And I was like, whoa, okay. When I was running before, I thought I was doing the thing, but obviously there were some things that were lacking. And now I have a clearer understanding, and that's actually taking me to a new level. So I think it's important to have an understanding of protocols and things that you can practice consistently to help you develop, and also have a foundation of some sort of ethics behind these things to make sure that we don't all, walk out of there and then just become the Sith. or something crazy. Obviously, I'm just joking, but and then that community of people working together for this common goal in this very beautiful way, in this very beautiful space, I think also is very important. So that's what this means for me, and that's what I want to try to impart. And lastly, I would say is historical understanding from the different traditions and lineages. And then also here in the West, the people who have explored these things and who did research on these things and what their findings were, And we see on our YouTube channel, people write in all the time, oh, this stuff has never been proven. Nobody's ever done any research on this. And it's like, what? There's tons of research. So then I'm like, you just didn't do your homework. You didn't go out there and actually read anything, because there's tons of research. Really competent scientists who delve deep into these aspects and have the information and the research to show it beyond what we know or what we may know as these multidimensional beings with teachers who are traversing these multidimensionals or multi-dimensions. Beyond that, there's people who are like, hey, well, I'm just a stuck in one dimension scientist and I just want to research this thing. And they even found that there was, precedent and evidence of this information. So that's another thing I want to impart. And so in our course, we'll be doing all of that. So for those who I am lucky enough to be with at this event, they are going to learn these skill sets, and they are going to learn them in an ethical way. And I'm so honored and glad that you are embarking on this journey with me, Kim, and that we are able to work together in this, because I have a lot to learn too. I have a lot to learn from you as well. So I'm going to be there as a student just as much as I am there as a host and as a presenter. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we're going to have a good time, right? I'm going to take and show people how to find portals too on that beautiful property.
Yeah.
So yeah, can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
And I think we only have like 3 or 4 slots left. So by the time this comes out, they might be sold or gone. But if not, then, sign up. And then also on our website, we are now going to do a series of different classes and trainings every year. And we have another one in May. The one in May is going to be about, intuitive perception, where we cover remote viewing and mind sight and dowsing. And that'll be in North Carolina. And this event that we're doing, this psychokinesis, which is called PK to some, we'll be doing that event in Austin, Texas. And that's coming up May 12th through the 16th in Austin, Texas at the Ancient Yoga Center.
March.
March. What did I say? What date?
May.
Okay.
Yeah.
May. Okay. March. All right. And we'll have a link to it in the show notes and also here on the video. So is anything else, Tyler? Did I miss anything?
No, I think looking forward to the event. Very exciting. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate everything. That was very educational, and I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, good luck with your practices. Let me know how they go. I'll see you out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See you on the astral.
See you on the astral. All right, my Psi enthusiasts, we are so happy that you joined us today here for Psi Games Talks, and also our beautiful host, or our beautiful guest, Kim, who has shared such deep knowledge with us, and of course, our beautiful co-host, Tyler.
Nice.
Thank you all. Until next time.